But let's talk about the Holocaust. And Finkelstein wrote his book, The Holocaust Industry. So the Holocaust is not, as we mentioned earlier, a huge part of the narrative. And then after Lebanon, things change. So there's a savagery, and the Holocaust takes preeminence in the narrative. There was a mini-series. I've never watched it. Maybe you watched it, but she writes about it in the book called The Holocaust. You have the Holocaust Museum, which she writes about, raising the question of why is there a Holocaust Museum on American soil? It's a pretty good question. But let's talk about the use of the Holocaust, because that's very much part, and after 9/11, this is all turbocharged, as you said. But ideologically, it's justified by the near annihilation of the Jews. And just as a caveat, in defense of Jewish refugees, the ones who survived World War II, they were locked out of everywhere, number one. And when they did try to go home to places like Poland, there were pogroms. I mean, we're talking about after World War II. So they really, I mean, that's the part of the tragedy. They had nowhere to go. There was that book, Neighbors, which is very good, on people trying to, Jewish families after surviving the death camps, trying to go back to their farms or their homes and being killed. So, I mean, that is, I think, the tragedy for all of us who have covered Israel extensively. But let's talk about the Holocaust, because the Holocaust becomes weaponized, and boy, she takes down Elie Wiesel, of course, who becomes, Mr. Holocaust, who I knew, actually. But let's talk about the Holocaust and its uses and what she writes about it.
Well, it's Peter Novick also who writes about the Holocaust industry. And I think he dates it even to 1967, after the Six-Day War. It becomes more and more of a justification for the kinds of things that Israel is doing. And then in the 80s, it comes into its own as an attempt to justify what can't be justified in terms of the war in Lebanon. But I think the point she makes about it is that it becomes, again, it's tied to that invincible victim thing. There's always the threat. The Holocaust happened, but it's never going to go away. That is, it happened, but it always exists as a possibility for happening again. And so part of the invincible victim story is that Jews have to always be alert about defending themselves against any sign that the Holocaust is about to reappear, and then attributed to Palestinians the possibility that they will bring another Holocaust. So the whole defense industry of Israel, the whole occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, become a way of arguing against the possibility of another Holocaust. What does she call that chapter? The Holocaust anticipated, or the Apocalypse Soon, she calls it.
Yeah.
The two chapters, the future Holocaust and Apocalypse Soon, are the arguments about we can never rest, because once it's happened, it always will happen again. And the existence of Jews, by definition, somehow suggests the possibility always of a Holocaust. And that makes them, you can't criticize anything that's being done in the name of not only sort of repairing the damage of the first Holocaust, but of preventing the next one.
And this is Abba Eban, who I also knew, very charming. Another factor that worked against the image of Palestinians in America was the overt effort by Israeli spokesmen and sympathetic journalists to undermine the revolutionary appeal of Palestinian resistance. Abba Eban protested that the guerrillas were not, quote, fighting for freedom, but were in fact fighters against freedom. He explained that, quote, the image that world opinion should have of them is not the image of the Marquis or resistance fighters, but the image of the SS, the image of the guards at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. We've seen that during the genocide, where now, was it Begin who equated, Begin, who told Reagan that when he was bombing West Beirut, he was attacking Hitler. I mean, he's attacking Arafat, but that it was, he drew that analogy. That has not gone away. That now becomes the raison d'etre for the subjugation of the Palestinians and the decimation of Gaza.
And Hamas is the new Nazi force. She has a thing where it's interesting where she talks about this further. She says terrorist violence by non-state actors, no matter how heinous, lacks the powerful state organization behind the systematic industrialized violence that characterized the Nazi slaughter of millions. Nonetheless, the repeated analogy between terrorism and the Holocaust had the powerful effect of tarring the entire Palestinian cause as a hateful reincarnation of the Nazi project to exterminate the Jews. At a time when the Carter and Reagan administrations continued Kissinger's pledge to Israel not to speak directly to the PLO, the conflation of Palestinians with terrorism and Nazism contributed to the public perception of the illegitimacy of the PLO and the cause it represented. And that goes on now. I mean, I don't know how many people I've had, fortunately they're not friends, they're just people I know who I've had conversations with who say, well, but Hamas is just like the Nazis. They want to exterminate Jews, they want to destroy the state of Israel, and you say to them, well, it's not the same thing. And there's no, the Nazi image attached now to the Palestinian cause is really hard to argue against.
That's a very important point. C.L.R. James makes the same point that she made in Black Jacobins, where he acknowledges that there were atrocities carried out during the only successful slave revolt in human history, but that it didn't have the state apparatus behind it. It didn't have the imperial power. But it's a very, very, very important point. I don't want to sugarcoat Hamas. I spent a lot of time with them, but that point is key. And